In today's video, we're taking a look at some NHL Trade Talk, looking at teams like the Senators and the Penguins. We have some more games postponed. We have some more news from the Waiver Wire, and the NHL appears to be setting up a way to help NHL clubs who might be struggling with their cash flow due to the lost revenue. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about here today. Let's get started first up with the news that the NHL appears to be setting up a credit facility upwards of $1 billion for all 31 NHL teams to be able to have access to should they need access to money to help with their cash flow. So anything to do with payroll or expenses, obviously due to lost revenue. There's a very, very few that are able to have fans in attendance right now, and even those arenas that are, they're not allowing very many, so there's really not a lot of revenue being generated, even though the NHL games are being played. Of course, there will be money coming in from TV revenue, etc., but still, the losses are pretty substantial. So each team would be able to access upwards of about $30 million. Now, this is not something that they need to do. If they're a team that's, got deeper pockets and are better off and they don't need to, that's fine, because I'm sure there are repayment terms. I don't know all of that structure, but we know that they are setting up a separate account here for teams to access. Now, normally the NHL does have a credit line available if a team ended up in financial need like that, but this is a separate thing that's strictly pandemic revenue loss related. Now, of course, we have other NHL news to discuss as well. We have more news from the NHL Waiver Wire. Yesterday, as I mentioned, we did have Yannick Weber on waivers. He has signed a new contract for the year with the Pittsburgh Penguins, but needed waivers in order to be able to join the team. He has indeed cleared, so he'd be able to join the Penguins now. They were hoping he'd be able to join them in time for their game in Boston tonight, but that's not unfortunately going to happen. Apparently on his way there, he gets stuck due to bad weather. Now the hopes are that he'll be able to join the Penguins in time for their next game in New York. So Weber is officially on the Penguins roster now. And then today we saw the Chicago Blackhawks sign unrestricted free agent defenseman Madison Bowey to a 2-year deal. So of course that's another player that's going to need waivers. So he's going to go through waivers today. If he remains unclaimed, he'll join the Hawks roster tomorrow once that everything clears. Obviously Bowey is in a situation where he can come in and play. I mean, he's got enough experience, but he's also interesting here is he's got one game shy to have enough NHL games to be qualified to be exposed in the Seattle expansion draft. So that very well could be why he's getting a 2-year deal here. Obviously, he needs to be under contract for next year, have enough experience in games played to qualify to be exposed to the Seattle expansion draft. So as much as it's about helping the team now, it's also about helping them later and having an eligible player there to make available, because obviously that's something a lot of teams are going to be looking at here. A lot of future moves you see heading into the remainder of this year are going to be geared around. We've already seen a bunch already, and there's bound to be more. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, we do have some more postponements. The game tonight between the Vegas Golden Knights and the St. Louis Blues has been postponed. Belief is there's been more positive tests on the Vegas side of things. We know that the Vegas coaching staff had to go into isolation prior to the previous game, which saw General Manager Kelly McCrimmon end up going behind the bench to take on the head coaching duties. So I'm not sure exactly where things lie here, but obviously that's not a good scene. Obviously, we don't know exactly how long Vegas is going to have to be out of action here, because they have to determine the risk associated with whoever the positive test was and who they've been around and all that. So obviously a lot of that kind of depends on the contact tracing, so we'll have to await further word. But morning skate was abruptly canceled this morning. Game was postponed, so we know something came through. We just don't know the severity of it or how long things are going to be that way before they can resume playing again. And unfortunately, in the ladies hockey, in the NWHL, of course, they're playing their shortened season in a bubble format in Lake Placid, New York. And there was word this morning that one of the teams actually is going to be exiting the bubble, the Metropolitan Riveters, and it's believed that it's due to health and safety concerns around COVID. So many are saying that it sounds like they've run into some positive tests on their team, and that the league has basically kind of had to force them out of the bubble to make sure that the other teams remain healthy and safe is what it sounds like. So waiting for further information to confirm and clarify that. But as of the recording of this video, that's obviously a blow to the women's hockey. They've gone through a lot in the news here, especially on social media. I don't know if you've been following along with what's going on, but clearly they're trying to get their season completed here in a unique format. And obviously that's a big blow to them to have a whole team kind of wiped out and forced to leave. So we'll stay tuned on further updates on that situation. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have some NHL trade talk regarding the Senators and the Penguins. I want to start with the Penguins because a lot of this kind of concerns around the abrupt stepping down or resignation from general manager Jim Rutherford, which surprised everybody yesterday. Now, of course, Rutherford, who's 71, been around the NHL a long time, a really experienced executive. He's been with the Penguins now for a long time. He's been there for two of their more recent Stanley Cup victories. Obviously played a big role, made a lot of big moves. It seemed like early on, especially, pretty much every move he made turned out gold. And he was getting a lot of players that really helped the team and did a fantastic job. Now, obviously, since that second Stanley Cup in 2017, it's been a bit more of a struggle. Regular seasons haven't been too bad, but they've had their ups and downs. And then we've seen a couple of consecutive years with early playoff exits and, in not so good fashion either. So it seems like the tide is turning there in Pittsburgh after all those years of all that success. They kind of seem to be trending down the other way. However, many in the Penguins organization still feel that as long as they have guys like Crosby and Malkin especially playing at a high level, that they still want to be able to compete for Stanley Cups and go for it. But right now, I'm not sure that the supporting cast is really strong enough to help them to allow to do that. Now, there was some social media talk that part of why Rutherford resigned was that is because he was working on a trade for longtime veteran defenseman Chris Letang, and when ownership got wind of this, that they put a stop to it, and essentially there was a difference in philosophies, and that's why he resigned abruptly. Because Rutherford himself has done interviews, I've seen comments from him just even in the last 3, 4, 5 days before his resignation, and there was nothing that sounded like anything was kind of heading towards that direction. I know I've seen many NHL writers and insiders kind of survey the other executives and other teams and look at all their contacts and ask what everybody thought, and a lot of people were surprised. Most people never seen it coming, but there is some sources on Twitter indicating that that's what they're hearing from a variety of people. Now, of course, it may not be true. I see other reports from other Penguins writers saying that, according to their sources, it had absolutely nothing to do with that it was just something that he decided at last minute. It's not a conflict regarding player personnel changes. It's not any issues at all between him and ownership. He just abruptly decided it was time to head out. We know Rutherford was in the final year of his contract, and there was probably a decent chance that he didn't return as GM after this year. At least that's what some people felt, so it seems like an odd time to have it happen now. And everything I just said, there's a good chance we may never fully know 100% truth. I mean, Rutherford had everything great to say about his time in Pittsburgh and ownership. You would not think there's any kind of bad blood or kind of a rift there at all. And if the Letang stuff actually has some truth to it, it doesn't mean that things really ever got all that bad. I mean, obviously, if they had a disagreement on philosophy, Rutherford might have just decided that at his age of 71, instead of butting heads with ownership, maybe it was just time to step away and let them do what they felt was best. I mean, doesn't mean that it was a big ugly scene or anything, but clearly the Penguins, like I said, they're in a situation that if they don't have playoff success or they miss the playoffs this year, I do think there's a much greater chance we would see more substantial change to the core. I don't think we're going to see guys like Crosby or Malkin. They would only move on if they wanted to themselves, and I don't really know that that's ever going to happen. A guy like Letang is certainly more of a possibility. There's been a lot of talk. They've been looking for help on the blue line. I know they saw injuries to guys like Marino as well as Dumoulin. Marino appears to be okay and will be able to play the next game. Dumoulin looks like he might be out for a little while, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be anything too long term. And after adding Yannick Weber yesterday, I'm not sure we're going to see any other moves. Of course, there's a lot of speculation already on who will replace Rutherford. I know looking at the broadcast last night on Sportsnet, they mentioned a number of names, and it's kind of a list of names that I'm really not sure about. They talked about Ron Hextall, former GM of the Philadelphia Flyers. I mean, Hextall, I thought actually did a pretty good job. When he was dismissed in Philly, I thought that was, a little premature there. I mean, he did a lot of good things, so I could see him get another opportunity at some point. Although working in Philly and playing in Philly all those years, it would be really weird seeing him go cross-state rival like that. They even mentioned Peter Chiarelli, and after the job he did in Edmonton, I'm kind of surprised that he would be mentioned. John Ferguson Jr.'s name has been brought up from the Boston Bruins. I mean, we know the job he did with Toronto, that was so long ago, but he has gotten a lot of consideration in recent GM jobs. So as much as his one go at it as a GM all those years ago didn't go very well, I could see a situation where he might get another opportunity. And although I'm not sure it's the perfect fit with Pittsburgh, they even mentioned Jason Botterill, who of course had a not so good run in Buffalo after a long stretch as an assistant GM with the Penguins organization, someone who they're very familiar with for sure. And, that could be, but he just also took a job with the Seattle Kraken too. He's not a GM. It would be a step up for him, and maybe Seattle would let him leave, but it just seems like maybe it's a little unlikely given the fact that he literally just went there. He's only been there like a couple of weeks, so odd timing on that part. And they even mentioned Tom Fitzgerald, who's currently with the New Jersey Devils, as a potential suitor for the Penguins job. Even though he's under contract with the New Jersey organization, I believe it's 3 or 4 years, he only has 1 year left guaranteed to be the GM. And many feel that he may want more stability as a GM if he has a chance to go to the Penguins organization. So it's another name to look at. But personally, I think there's other names out there too. I mean, obviously, there's all kinds of experienced guys around the NHL that are currently looking for work that have worked in the past. I would throw Mike Gillis' name in there too. I'm not sure if he'd really be in consideration, but I know he's a former executive that's been in consideration and interviewed for other recent jobs. So it's a job that's going to be highly coveted. I mean, Pittsburgh's a great franchise, a lot of history there, a lot of great success. There's still some great pieces. I can see a lot of people being interested, and they won't have any shortage. And it does sound like they still obviously want to go forward here. I mean, the president of hockey operations put out a statement saying they do not want a rebuild, that they're in win now mode, which is also kind of fueled that speculation that Rutherford might have wanted to break up that core and trade Letang. That's kind of what that might have implied, but just seemed like an odd thing for them to say. But at the same time, they don't seem to want to take too long to make a decision here. There's a lot of business that would likely need to be taken care of. They do have their temporary guy in place, so it's been with the organization for a long time, and he will be considered as well. But still, it's a situation that I would think will be resolved here in short order. Lastly, here I want to touch on the Ottawa Senators. They're a team that's been absolutely, really struggling, even though they came out and the team themselves, Pierre Dorion, Eugene Melnyk, went on before the season started saying they've seen this team not only being better this year, but better enough to challenge for the playoffs. And at this point, they're going to be dead last in the North Division, which many people predicted. And apparently they're looking at a lot of their longer-term deals that they have on the books and are considering making trades already early into the season. They won their first game, and they've been hot garbage ever since. I mean, looking at guys like even Colin White would be one of the younger players that would not be shocking to see traded. He's not playing on a regular basis. When he is, he's not getting great ice time. Looks like he's lost his confidence. And at this point, I can't help but wonder if a change of scenery might be good for him. They have a lot of young players who can play that kind of role. He's signed on for another 4 years at $4.5 million. So it's not a terrible contract if he plays up to his potential, but it is if he's not going to be playing or not playing very well. So we'll see what happens there. Other guys, they would even look like Mike Riley on defense was really terrible last night. He's a guy in the blue line that could go. You have other guys like Artem Anisimov in the final year of his deal, Cedric Paquette, Derek Stepan. A lot of these veteran guys, they're brought in to insulate the young players, but it's like the opposite right now. The top line of Tkachuk, Batherson, and Josh Norris I thought have been really good, but they need to be insulated and maybe be more of a second line and have some other guys who can kind of, shelter them a little bit. If they're getting the top defensive line from the other teams all the time, they're not going to be getting the best offensive chances all the time either. If they're playing a little bit lower in the lineup, I think they could have sold a lot better. The vets that they brought in just aren't good enough, plain and simple, and they're apparently looking at all of that. And even though we saw a minor 3-way deal for them the other day, there's very much a real possibility we could see a lot more activity here coming in the next little bit as they try to shake things up and get things back on track, because I would think after the start they had, they can't be too pleased with how things have gone. Let me know your thoughts on what they should do down in the comments. What players do you think should be moved out, and can they really get much for them is the problem. When these vets are not playing well and don't have the most desirable contracts, not exactly easy to trade. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.